Alright guys, let's go! In this video I'm gonna show you how to create this kind of fire with tyFlow Zenith, and also how to shade it inside of Max's viewport with tyFlow Zenith, and also how to export it and render it in V-Ray and keep the same shading. So first off, I'm gonna start with a sphere, and then later in the video I'm gonna change this geometry to something else, so it should be universal, it should be able to get applied to any kind of geometry. So here I'm gonna pick the sphere in the emitter, let it run, just to make sure that everything's okay. I'm gonna disable whooping, real time should also be off so that I don't skip any frames on the timeline. Alright, and that's the default simulation. So from here I will go straight to the display settings. So the default simulation is good enough, it has everything that it needs, so I'm just only gonna change one thing. So right here in Bird Inferno, under the density, I'm gonna increase the smoke dissipation. So if I start raising this value, the smoke is gonna start disappearing. Alright, so I'm gonna raise it to 0.8, so 0.8. So if I set it to 1, the smoke is gonna just instantly disappear. So it's gonna fade out immediately. So this means what fraction of the smoke is gonna disappear in 1 second. So I'm gonna set it to 0.8, and this means that each second 80% of the smoke is gonna go away. So it's in seconds because if you want to change the timeline, the frames per second of your simulation is gonna persist and it's not gonna be affected. So also gonna extend the timeline a bit. Let's make it 200 frames so that it rises up a little more. And that's the base simulation that we're gonna start with. So later I'm gonna go back to the simulation settings and adjust them, but right now we can just go straight for the fire hook in the beginning, so that later when we start tweaking it will be easier to see what's going on. So here by default now we're using the classic fire preset, that's it. I can also try this one, but it's not very close to what we're after. Hardcore, oil burn, neither of those. These are more suitable for explosions, or the torch is a bit closer to what I'm aiming for. Alright, so I'm just gonna start by I'm gonna delete all those markers, and I'm just gonna go with a very simple color gradient. So you could add more details. So here you can see how it starts getting interesting for a while. So I'm just gonna dial in the colors now, and I'm gonna start with the lower temperature here is gonna have 246, 143, 67. That's just the color that I used for the video in the beginning. And then the higher temperature, its color is gonna be 255, 72, 16, like this. And I'm also gonna shrink the temperature range right here. So first off, it cuts off some of the temperature, so the temperature below 0.35 is not taken into account. So I'm gonna set this to 0, and I'm gonna set the maximum to 4. So 4 is in the normalized units, so it's like about 1200. And then the most important thing that governs the way that the fire looks is the fire opacity curve. So here I'm gonna just create a spike in the middle like this. I'm just gonna make it, so I'm gonna shrink this a little, and that's gonna be the thing that gives the fire its fire look. So I'm just gonna do a couple of changes. So while I scroll the timeline, I don't want it to be noisy. So right here I'm gonna disable the stochastic ray sampling, but this way it starts getting drawn in these it shows these bands in the fire. So in order to remedy this, I'm gonna reduce the step size. So this is in voxels. By default, it's using 1 voxel. So the rays that are shading the fire are stepping throughout each voxel. But I want, since this curve is able to create detail that is smaller than a voxel, I need to be able to capture that, and in order to do this, I will reduce the step size of the rays throughout the fire. So it's gonna look like this, and now that I'm playing the timeline, it's not gonna get as noisy as before. So it's gonna be slower to play, but it's gonna be cleaner. And I'm just also gonna adjust the intensity. So I was using intensity of about 7. But now it's getting too muddy because also the smoke is also in the way. I'm also gonna change this sphere, just gonna make it gray. Yeah, so that it doesn't divert our attention from the flames. And then I'm gonna lower this to about 1.5. But then I'm gonna increase this intensity right here. So you can see the effect that it has. So in the scene that I was using, this was about 0.5. It was not quite an exact number, but it was something like this. So now it gets more it gets filled up on the inside more. So if I start playing with the curve right here, just changing this, is gonna allow it to hollow out, while changing this is gonna allow the fire to spread out more. So you could use this in combination with the solver settings in order to adjust the way that the fire looks. So now this is gonna be the base look for the fire. I think that I'm done with the shading. These are all the options that I'm gonna use. So I'm just gonna go, and since for that scene in the beginning I was using more intensity for the glow, let me make it 0.3 like this. So just make it more fire in the viewport by default. However, now that the shading has started taking shape, now we can see that the actual shape of the fire is not really is not really good. So it's just pointing straight up. It's doing some interesting stuff here and at the top, but it's not really great. So now I'm gonna go back to the solver, and I can do a couple of things right here. So first off, if I increase the conservation, let's just zoom out a little and let's see how it behaves. So you can see the smoke right here is just pointing upwards, it's just moving up. If I increase the conservation, I'm gonna increase it 8 times. So this is one of the most important options for the look of the simulation. Is gonna make the smoke and the fire roll more, but it's also the one that affects the performance of the simulation the most. So increasing the conservation is gonna make the simulation slower, but now the smoke and the fire, they're gonna start rolling more, and they're gonna start forming more interesting shapes. And also I'm gonna decrease the resolution. So I could, if I increase the voxel size, just make it a bit chunkier, the render settings are gonna hold up. And however, in order to add more detail to this, I'm gonna decrease it, and I'm gonna use 0.04. So by default it was 0.65. Now I'm gonna make it 0.04. And now it's gonna start getting more interesting details here. And also, there are a couple of settings right here at the bottom of the Bird Inferno. In the temperature, we could use the cooling in order to control the way that the fire looks. And another very important option is the cooling shrinkage. So just like in the other tutorial about the jet engine, I could use this to make the fire more pointy, or I could allow it to spill out more. So if I raise it to 5, the fire is going to start shrinking at the top. So I could add even more. Let's make it 10. And now this is going to start squeezing the fire the more that it goes upwards. And this is going to allow these tongues of fire to start forming. So I'm going to lower this a bit. I wonder if I should lower this, or maybe I'm going to keep it. So in the original scene, I was using 5 for this value, and also, yeah, if I increase the shrinkage, if I increase the cooling, so if I make it 0.8, for example, that's just going to shorten the flames. Or otherwise, if I decrease the cooling, the flames are everything is gonna get longer here. They're gonna start rising up more. So I'm gonna keep this at about 0.6. Hold on, I did this while I was at the last frame, so now it's gonna recalculate the entire timeline. All right, so that's the these are the settings that I used in the original simulation. So now if I could even change the geometry. So let me just add a box. Just gonna make it as big as the default grid. So if I hide the sphere here, if I pick the box, hold on, and I'm gonna remove the sphere. Maybe I'll just set the box to gray as well. Did I manage to do this though? All right, now that I deselected it, it appeared. All right, so now we're getting the banding again. While I'm playing, it shows up, but then it stops. So I'm gonna go into the Inferno Display and also disable the adaptive playback degradation. So that's the option that causes this. All right, and here is how it's gonna look with a different emitter shape. So in order to make this even more interesting, later I'm gonna add a wind force in order to blow it to the side and just not have it that symmetric. So for now, I'm just gonna return the spherical emitter. I wonder if, yeah, I should, yeah, I will hide it like this. Yeah, maybe make it a bit larger. All right, and again, once we have the simulation like this, we can go back to the render settings and we can we can change the curve in order to change the look. So we can again hollow it out more, or have it more filled with fire, and we can also control how much of the temperature is actually getting displayed as fire. So there is a smoother transition right here that even when it's in motion, it starts looking a bit like it's motion blurred, even though it's not. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it like this for now. I think that this looks okay, and yeah, you could continue adjusting it, but this look, it requires a very simple curve here and a very simple color gradient. If you want to add more details, you could add more colors right here. So on the left is the lower temperature, on the right is the higher temperature for both the color gradient and for the opacity. So you could play with this a lot and get a different kind of look. And now I'm gonna also add the embers. So I'm gonna go to an earlier frame. I'm gonna add an Inferno Spawn right here so that I could start creating the ember particles. So by default we don't see anything, so I'm gonna send them out to a new event, and they start getting shown here as small dots. Let me make them white. Alright, and now the simulation is creating these particles. I'm gonna change the condition. So right now it's creating them where there is more density. So instead I want to create them where there is more temperature. I'm gonna disable that, go to an earlier frame so that I could work faster, and I'm gonna create them where the temperature is higher. I'm also gonna limit them because now they take all the places where there is any kind of temperature. So I'm gonna set the threshold between 5 and 6. Between 5 and 5 there is just it's too narrow. So yeah, I'm gonna make it like this. And those particles now are gonna get created only where the temperature is hot. So now that the temperature is cooling off as it moves upwards, these particles are just getting created right here near the emitter. So the next thing is that I wanna drag them together with the fluid. So I'm also gonna add an Inferno properties operator right here. So this is gonna read the properties of the underlying fluid, and it's gonna apply them to the particles. So by default it's gonna start reading the velocity, and now the particles are gonna start getting advected with the fluid. However, now this looks like ink in water kind of simulation. So it's just taking these particles and it's just swirling them around infinitely. So I'm also gonna add a delete operator. Yeah, maybe scroll to the earlier part of the timeline, just move it in the middle. And I'm gonna tell it to start deleting the particles. So the values that I use are at an age of 80 frames plus minus 50. So at this point, some of the particles, half of the particles should start getting deleted, and some of them would even start getting deleted at this point if they are created at the beginning of the simulation. And also these particles are way too much, so I'm gonna go back to the Inferno Spawn and just reduce them. So if I go with 100, there are a few of those. All right, here they are. Also, I was in my initial simulation, I was using 5.6 here, so I'm gonna narrow the range even more, so we'll get even less particles. So you could control the amount of particles here from the rate, or here from the per cube of size. So if you decrease this size, you're gonna get more particles overall. As well, you could limit the particles right here, or you could use this range. So I'm gonna limit the birth of the embers just to the hottest parts of the fire, like this. All right, and one other thing that I found was looking a bit better, but again, it's your choice. But what I did was here in the Inferno properties, I told it to inherit just 50% of the velocity. So I'm going to enable the velocity like this, and actually I don't really need to do that. So I'm just going to set this to 50. And this way, the velocity from the simulation is not gonna get applied directly to the particles. Actually, hold on. Let me just go back. Let me spawn more particles so that it would be more visible. So let's go back to 100%. And here is how it looks when the full velocity is getting transferred to the particles. This makes them look like they're really light. So the smoke and the fire that is moving through them affects them just instantly. And if I set this to if I just halve the influence, it's gonna make it look like there is a bit of drag applied to those particles. So they're gonna stop and hang in the air for a bit longer. They're still gonna get affected by the velocity, but not that much. So I think that this looks a bit better, but again, it's your choice. Just showing you that this is also an option. So now at the beginning there aren't gonna be many particles. Maybe I should increase the rate a little. Okay, let me make the rate like 300. Right, so at this point, the embers are reaching the top of the fire. Actually, I'm gonna increase the timeline even more. Let's make it 300 frames. And this should be the moment where the embers are gonna get interesting. So here we would be able to see how the fire plays with them. But there is one more thing that I want to add to this setup. So this is not my idea. I saw it in one setup by Sergei Movchan. So he used an Inferno splines, tyFlow splines, so a spline measure. So I'm gonna use that in order to make the paths of the embers more visible. So it's kind of like faking motion blur. So I'm going to use that because I find that effect interesting, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So I'm going to create a new tySplines object like this, and here you can see that the paths of these particles are now starting to grow. So by default, it's going to take the entire path of each particle, and it's just gonna draw a line that just follows its trajectory. So in order to show just the final few frames. I'm gonna also disable just the display here entirely. Now that we have the paths in the viewport, we don't need that. So I think that it was here in the tie splines. Here it is. So we have the maximum age, and I could set this to 5, for example. And now it's going to shorten the path to just the last 5 frames. These are too long, however. You can see that they're swirling a bit too much. So in the end, I'm just going to shorten them to 2. Now changing this is not going to recalculate the simulation, so yeah, you could experiment with this on the go. But yeah, if I just make it 1, I think it's a bit too short. It shows kind of the trajectory and the direction of movement, but yeah, I ended up using 2 in the end. Alright, so I'm gonna switch again to the box emitter. I'm gonna pick it in the Inferno emitter, and now you can see that these are starting to show as blue. So I could change their viewport color like this. So even if I deselect them, they aren't a different color. But ultimately, I should just add a material to the actual to the actual mesh that the tie spliner produces. So, and this is going to be useful also when I'm rendering those particles. So let me just switch the sphere for the box. Now, since we have a larger emitter, it's going to take some time to get there. So let me just go back and go and select tyFlow so that I would be able to see the markers on the timeline. And now here with the larger simulation, I think that the number of these ember particles is a bit too high, so I'm gonna lower them a little. Let me just wait a bit and just see how they look over the fire, but here at the base they are a bit too much. So this could also be controlled by changing the condition for the deletion of the particles. So maybe we could spawn less particles but have them live longer. Yeah, well, on top the situation is not that bad, but maybe I would just lower them to from 300 to 200 maybe. And I'm also gonna add the wind force. Because now the thing is too symmetrical, I just want to steer it up. So I'm gonna add an Inferno force like this, and I'm just going to dial in the wind right here. I'm just gonna use the built-in wind. So I'm gonna use, let me just rewind it so that it doesn't recalculate the entire timeline, 0.7 minus 1, and the strength of the wind force was very low. It was 0.08 meters. So now it's gonna start blowing everything to the side. Alright, and now that I'm looking at my notes, I can see that I've also forgotten to enable PCG conservation, so it's gonna allow the simulation to swirl even more. So I can go here under the Advanced tab, and if I rewind back, I'm just gonna enable PCG. Let me even show you just the difference between the look on the simple sphere. So I'm gonna, whoops, no, just bring it back. No, don't. Yeah, gonna pick the sphere, let it run with PCG disabled. So this is how it looked, and maybe also disable the force. Right, so it's swirling a little, so I also increased the just the conservation quality a lot, but enabling PCG is gonna add even more of that swirling. So if I turn this on, here's how it's gonna look. It's gonna start rolling even more like this. It's gonna break it up a little more. Alright, so you can see that more interesting stuff is gonna start happening here. Again, it's not a big difference for this scene, for this kind of emitter, for the plane. However, it's gonna allow the fire to swirl a little more as the wind blows it to the side. So there is gonna have a more visible effect. So again, let me just pick the box, pause it, enable the wind, pause again, rewind, and let this simulate with PCG enabled. And now here along the edges it's gonna rotate more. Right, so I'm gonna keep it like this. Gonna pause it here, not gonna run until the end of the simulation, and I'm gonna render this in VRay now. So let me just pick something else before I go on. Just want to show you how to speed the simulation up a bit. So if I choose the camera angle that I'm happy with, let's just see. So how does this look? Yeah, maybe a bit lower. Maybe looking more from the side. Right, so if I'm happy with this camera angle, so I can just create a camera, and I can create an Inferno Bounds operator right here, so that the simulation won't expand outside of the camera view and it's going to be faster to simulate. So I'm going to add an Inferno Bounds operator right here. Right, go back to the beginning and pick the camera, and now let it run again. So this is going to help the performance a little. So the largest impact over the performance of this scene is the conservation quality. So I've boosted this a lot. So this is gonna be the most important thing about how long the simulation takes. So if you think that it's gonna work fine, you can lower this and gain back a lot of the performance. So this scene is generally gonna run slower than most of the other simulations because they don't need that much conservation. So the other setups that I've done, even the nuclear explosion, which requires a lot of conservation, is not that high. So yeah, so now the fire is creating some interesting swirls right here. Let me just go back to the display and see if I need to change anything right here, if it's gonna make it look better. So if I tighten this a little, now it's getting sharper. So if you don't like these huge white spots at the tips of the flames, you can reduce them by moving the curve here. If I allow them to appear just a little, it makes it look a bit more motion blurred, but I'm not gonna overdo it. So just maybe choose something in the middle. I can also hollow out the flames a bit more like this. So maybe that's how I'm gonna leave it. Just make the spike even spikier. All right, and which frame am I gonna use for the rendering? Maybe, yeah, maybe this one. Like, let's say 131. All right, or 1232. So in order to render this in V-Ray, if I switch the renderer to V-Ray right now, if I render this out, it's gonna start rendering the embers. So I could even start right now by first adding the material that I used for them. So I need to apply the material to the tie splines right here. So I just used a PBR specular and gloss material. So there is nothing special about my choice. Nothing depends on it. So you could use anything. So this is just the first material that I grabbed. The only requirement that I had was that I just wanted to have some emission color. So I'm gonna make the specular white. I'm gonna make the albedo like a bit yellowish, and that's everything. So if I go and render this right now, am I gonna get anything actually? No, because it's good that I created this material, but I should also apply it to, hold on, should I, let me find the splines in the viewport, let me switch to the perspective. I could have also applied it to the selection. All right, so let's do it like this and go back to the camera. Yeah, that I could have done this a bit better. So yeah, now the embers are appearing. They're too chunky, however, so let's make them a bit finer. So here I'm gonna decrease the radius to 0.01, and yeah, so this way they're gonna cast a little less illumination than they did before. They were illuminating the ground plane a little, so now that's not going to be this visible. Also, the entire thing with faking the motion blur with these particles, you could, if you just enable motion blur in the renderer and you're not going to use a type preview in the viewport, you could get rid of this entire thing. So, but I'm just going to continue the way that I started. So now, in order to export this entire thing to V-Ray, I'm gonna have to write VDBs. So until we get the full render, the native renderer support, rendering through VDBs is gonna be the way to go. So I'm gonna add an Inferno export right here. Just gonna dump those VDBs on the desktop. And which frame was I gonna use? Was it 132? Alright, so I'm gonna tell it to just export from 0 to 140. Gonna write out the VDBs, and the VDBs, they're only gonna contain the fire data, so the splines are already in the viewport. In theory, and also in practice, VDBs, they support particles, but from tyFlow Zenith, we don't export particles to VDBs at the moment. Eventually, we could do that as well. So that there would be both the voxels and the particles if they need to go into some other software or into a different renderer. So now that I have the exported VDBs, I'm going to create a VRayVolumeGrid. Pick just any of those exported VDBs, choose no preset. I'm going to turn off the voxel preview right here. So I'm just going to turn off the temperature, the smoke, and the fuel and the RGB just in case. So I'm just going to turn everything off. I'm going to center this at 0, 0, like this. And if I render it right now, what are we going to see? So these embers are starting to try and cast some illumination over the smoke. So here it is. The smoke shows in the alpha already. So I'm not gonna depend on the fire and the embers just illuminating the smoke. I could also do that, but I'm gonna add a V-Ray light as well, but just not gonna make it too powerful. So yeah, I'm gonna add a maybe like this. I'm just gonna lower the intensity and see how this looks. Right, so something starts happening. I'm just gonna hide the history panel right here. I'm gonna shrink this a little so we could kind of see things side by side. And now I forgot that now that I want to export the VDBs to V-Ray, it's best that I export the temperature in kelvins. So I'm gonna enable this from the export Inferno. I'm just gonna enable units here, and I'm gonna export it into kelvins. Otherwise, right here in the volume grid, you can see that the temperature goes from 0 to to 5 point something, almost 6. But the VRayVolumeGrid is gonna love it when the stuff is gonna be exported in kelvins. So I'm just gonna overwrite those VDBs again. Go export, go! Almost there. If we join hands and wish for the export to finish even sooner, it's gonna do that. So if I render it like this, still need to adjust some of the render settings, but now if I go here in the volumetric options, hold on, do I still need to adjust any of the render settings, or do I just need to move the timeline a little? All right, here it is. So this area right here, it denotes the range of the data that is loaded in the volume grid. So if I render it right now, it's gonna refresh. Otherwise, it was just it had already read the VDB from disk and it had stored it in RAM. And now this is how it's gonna look with the default render options. So it's not very close to what we had in the Zenith viewport. So now it's time to start equalizing it. And the first thing that I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into the Inferno Display, and I'm gonna copy the color gradient, although it's not that different. but yeah, it's it's kind of inverse. So the colder temperature, the lower temperature is gonna be brighter, and the hotter flames are gonna be a bit more reddish. And then paste this entire diagram right here. So if I render this, it's gonna start looking different, but the next thing that I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna eyeball it. Otherwise, it's the way that I recommend doing the entire equalization is, again, just first turning off the fire and rendering only the smoke, and first equalizing the smoke alpha, then equalizing the smoke color, then turning off the smoke, rendering the fire, and equalizing that in the same way as the smoke, and finally turning everything back together. Oh, hold on. So, and there is one more thing that is also very important, apart from the color gradient and the curve, is that I'm gonna set physically based to 0. If I do that, it's gonna change a little bit as well. So now it's gonna start looking a bit more like what we had in Zenith, but the physically based option is mimicking a black body curve. So the higher temperature is gonna get even brighter. So I'm gonna turn it off just in order to have one-to-one mapping between the way that the Zenith viewport gets rendered. And also I'm gonna switch from fully visible to use own opacity. So this is the Phoenix and the volume grid mode that matches best what Zenith does. And I just know from experience that with V-Ray, I gotta just boost the fire multiplier like 10 or 10, 20, 50 times, and reduce the opacity multiplier like 10, 20, 50 times. So that's gonna be a good starting point for the way that it's gonna look. Alright, it's shaping up, and also here, since we have a bit of smoke, and the illumination that the fire casts on the smoke also kind of mimics the glow that we were using here in the viewport. So in this case, it looks like I need more intensity for the fire, so let's make it more intense. Stop this. I'm just gonna close the Zenith options, just have those as close to side by side as possible with my monitor. So yeah, just gonna boost it to like, I don't know, 40 or 50. Let's try 50 and see how it looks. Now the self-illumination is gonna take more time because it's brighter and it's gonna reach even further. And let's see how it's gonna look when it clears out a bit. It's still noisy in the beginning. Now with the progressive rendering, we could allow the since in the Zenith display options, I reduced the render step to 0.1, meaning 10% of the cell size. So here the progressive rendering, and also if you notice that before I turned off the adaptive ray sampling in the Zenith viewport, it started off noisy, but then it cleared up. So V-Ray is gonna do that as well, but yeah, if you're using the bucket sampler, it's best to go and also reduce the render step for the VRayVolumeGrid as well. So now maybe I overcooked it a little, but overall we are getting the firework. So I should lower this a bit. And now we also have the illumination from the fire over the smoke, even though the smoke is not that prominent right here. So what I'm gonna do is one final tweak. So I'm gonna go back to the... Alright, so here is the render step that I was talking about. So if you're using the bucket sampler, you should reduce this as well. Otherwise, you're gonna get noise, and it's not gonna be able to capture those fine details of the fire. So I'm just gonna go back to the V-Ray Sun and maybe boost this a little. Just make it, well, a little, like 4 times, and also. Also go back to the volume grid and reduce the fire multiplier to 40 or 35. Okay, let's try 35 and just triangulate it towards the desired value. Now the thing that I did is not gonna be very smart, because changing 2 options at a time, if I get an unpredictable result, I'm not gonna be able to tell which one actually caused it. So I should have just changed one option, rendered, then changed the other. But yeah, hoping for the best. Right, since the smoke is quite thin, even when I increase the illumination from the sun a little, it just doesn't really show much depth still. Yeah, so this fire intensity is probably kind of okay. So here we have some of those details starting to pop up. Maybe I should also change the fire opacity a little, but yeah, from this point on it should be about just gently adjusting the fire intensity, the fire opacity. And one final thing that I want to do is I'm just gonna try and make the smoke a bit more interesting. So what's gonna happen if I decrease the external scatter multiplier so that it casts a bit stronger shadows? So let's make it 0.4, render again. I should have probably used a render region just for this part of the smoke. This was gonna answer my question a bit more quickly. I cannot say that this made a huge difference. Right, so let's mark just this part of the image and let's lower it even more. I just want to make sure that this is the way to go. So let's drop it down to 0.1, for example. If this still does not comply, I might try just disabling the scattering entirely. So that way it's gonna certainly make the smoke appear thicker. Yeah, something starts happening here and here. Bam. Let's see if I overdid it. No, not much difference even this way. Yeah, so now it's not gonna, the scatter multiplier is not gonna work because it's not scattering anymore. So let's go back to approximate for shadows. What if I make it 100? Oh, is this the minimum? So maybe the alternative would be to just have the smoke opacity a bit higher. Yeah. But the downside of this is that it's gonna start occluding the fire a little. So now the smoke has a bit more depth. The problem with this is that this smoke is too thin. It doesn't have the so much volume to be able to cast such thick shadows over itself. So let's see how the entire thing works in the end. Here it starts looking promising, but hopefully it doesn't take away too much from the fire. And now also we can start seeing some of this grain, so I would probably blame this on the volume white cache. So this is not gonna be the final render. There's gonna be one more. I'm just gonna disable the volume white cache entirely and just see how it works without it. Right, so the fire is not that damaged from increasing the smoke opacity, because here there is not much smoke anyway, but in this part it's gonna start occluding other parts of the fire. So if there are other flames here that should show up, they would suffer from the increased smoke opacity. Right, so let me just turn off the volume white cache in the end and see how this is gonna affect, especially this area here where it's quite grainy. So just turning off the volume white cache is gonna trade voxel size noise for pixel size noise, and it's also gonna affect the speed. So back in 2012 the volume white cache was just a huge time saver. Right now for some scenes, for maybe half of the scenes, it's actually even slower than before. So eventually the moment is gonna come when this option is just gonna be completely irrelevant and removed, but yeah, I did not live to see this. Alright, so our pixel-sized noise is here, so yeah, it's gonna be just a matter of time until it's cleared. And that was everything that I wanted to show you guys. So this is how to create this kind of frame, this kind of flame, shade it in tyFlow Zenith, export it to VRay, add those embers with Inferno Spawn, and this is the same workflow if you want to create other kinds of particles over the fire and smoke simulations as well. So mesh them with Spline Mesher. Again, credits to Sergey Movchan for this idea. And yeah, exported it to VRay using VDBs, copied the render settings, got kind of the same look, and also got this kind of thing, like the illumination from the fire over the smoke that would just be impossible in the Inferno viewport. Still got a lot of noise to clean up, but yeah, just gonna leave it render for a little more. So thanks guys for watching. I hope that this video contained useful information and things that you did not know before, and it was helpful. And yeah, see you in the next one. Bye.